The bulk of my career here at Microsoft has been doing very large-scale, high-throughput distributed business systems. Distributed data access, caching, constraint optimization for advertising networks, OLTP systems for Java, cloud-scale analytics. My most recent project is Isotope, which is all about bringing Apache Hadoop to Windows Azure and Windows Server. Right now, the technological on-ramp to using Hadoop is significant. Part of what we're accomplishing with Isotope is producing a Hadoop that can truly democratize big data. So this radical democratic empowerment that open data combined with open source tools and the data science required to sort of meld data and technology, these are sort of like the three vertices in the triangle that are driving this mass adoption and explosion of big data-based services. If we look on the core of, Hadoop, it consists of basically a scheduling engine for distributed workload processing called MapReduce in its current incarnation, and HDFS, a distributed file system. Pretty much everything else is built out as a part of the federated ecosystem. So people, for instance, build things like Hive.
Yep. The
People
querying
think
language.
like Big. Exactly. Yep. People build technologies that allow you to interface between HDFS and classic enterprise information systems. So technologies like Scoop, which allow you to integrate relational data sources, exist.
Yep.
Technologies like Flume, which allow you to basically access lots and lots of log data, which may be generated by sensor network, by web logs, and whatnot. And the key is to, of course, provide bidirectional integration. Now, above that, you have interesting projects, and I'll simply only call out a few of them. There are actually so many. Mahout, which is an Apache sister project, which is all about large-scale machine learning in a Hadoop environment. So one of the classic stumbling blocks that many analytics vendors have found is that their technologies and products were designed for what I call the single data analyst, single workstation model. And you typically paid a premium on that. Now what's interesting is that the cost of storage in the cloud, the cost of computation in the cloud has basically plummeted to virtually nothing. So the model that most people now have of doing analytics is not pulling all the world's data onto a single workstation or a laptop or a smartphone, but working interactively and having the cloud or a large enterprise cluster, shared enterprise cluster, be the place that analytics, data mining, pattern classification, social network analytics happens. So people have been building things like Mahout, they've been building interesting indexing technologies like Lucene, one of the original, frankly, impetuses for the creation of Hadoop, and for instance, really interesting graph mining libraries like Pegasus, which allow people to do everything from PageRank to doing sort of social network analysis to figure out betweenness centrality, which you can see how one can then begin to build vertical applications that leverage one or more of these technologies. Let's say you're trying to build some kind of social scoring system and providing everyone a unique global score in some way, a rating. You can think of it as like a FICO score, a coolness factor,
that's right.
What have you.
Popularity score.
Exactly, which can be very useful to people building downstream, analytics applications, building downstream sort of data warehouses, so they can understand in a time series fashion who was most popular a week ago, a month ago, by region, by some other kind of pivot. And where we see Isotope is a really interesting packaging of these core technologies in a way that can be leveraged on the Windows Azure environment, as well as in on-premise, what are referred to as private clouds. The other interesting aspect is that we've developed technologies through ODBC, what we call that can actually leverage data that's been generated in Hive, and then targeting all kinds of BI applications, as well as Excel, perhaps the preeminent business intelligence Office BI application, so that people working with Isotope can actually do Hive, interactive Hive, bind the results into Excel graphics, merge that with spreadsheet data to do whatever kind of forecasting, analytics, customer segmentation they need to do. As far as they're concerned, they operate in an Excel Office collaboration environment. The rest of the infrastructure, which is cloud scale, meaning that it's petascale and eventually exascale, is utterly transparent to them. That level of transparency and the transparent access to analytical computation, as well as being able to reach almost any form of data in any shape it happens to be, is really at the core of what Isotope is providing this scale invariant analytics and insight platform that can integrate data that's cloud native, that's enterprise native, that shuffles between the two, that's been derived from multiple sources, that's been sold through things like the Azure Data Market, something that we actually have built-in support that can play in, so that third-party content providers, and resellers can actually vend their data. Let's say it's financial time series information, which they want to make available through the Azure Data Marketplace. I want to build, for instance, a risk management app. Azure now is a fantastic place to do that with the advent of Isotope. And then, wonderfully, all of the computational output can flow very naturally into SQL analysis services, into SQL Server parallel data warehousing appliances, into our Power Pivot technologies for BI, sort of augmented BI in Excel, so that the different sets of customers and users can actually interact with the system in a first-class way, whether they're business users, whether they're low-level programmers, whether they're people attempting to do operational analytics, whether they're just marketing professionals trying to figure out of a list of 1 million potential customer contacts, who would be the most interesting to, for instance, target with advertising, because the yield and the lift are really significant. So it's interesting that all of this infrastructure often, when it's all said and done, emits very simple answers, like this is your score, this is your rating, this is the segment or category you belong into. But those are the markers or the insights that can immediately be actioned by business people to drive sales motions and to drive competitiveness. Remember, I spoke about competing on analytics as the sort of macro phenomenon that's really driving big data. So at the end of the day, it's human beings making smarter, better decisions far more rapidly and ahead of other smart, capable business people in a competitive environment that is driving this, as well as all the classic volume, velocity, and variety markers that we often talk about. So Isotope is our internal code name for Apache Hadoop on Windows Azure and Apache Hadoop on Windows Server. We are doing a CTP actually here in the middle of December, as well as an enterprise TAP program to provide the technology both on Azure and Windows Server to customers. They'll be able to request invitation codes and be able to access our Azure-based portal, get elastic MapReduce services, in fact, our entire tool chain and infrastructure. TAP customers will be able to deploy using our MSIs directly onto their native enterprise Windows Server environments. They'll be able to be up and running with up to thousands of nodes of Hadoop in a matter of minutes, thanks to our sort of distributed deployment configuration tools. In March of 2012, we'll be producing the general availability of our Isotope on Azure. And in June, we will provide the GA of our Enterprise Edition, which will include important integration technologies, HDFS integrated with Active Directory, so that you have basically global single sign-on, so that once you've, in some sense, registered or authenticated to be able to read your email, you're now ready to basically do analytics. And we think that the level of removing seams and removing friction and time to leverage of insight is very important. Additionally, we will be providing deep integration with System Center operations managers so that people will be able to have a single unified command and control for operationally monitoring, managing, deploying, and upgrading Hadoop in an environment in which Windows is the primary operating system, in some sense the ecological environment in which computation, insight, and analytics are happening. And then we will roughly move to 3-month cadences for release of our Azure services as well as service packs of our Enterprise Edition. That's our rough timeline. The project itself has been initially started over a year ago by me and two of my dear co-founders and friends, initially coming at it from the level of cloud scale analytics. We've been joined by not only our core team of engineers, but a fantastic sort of internal ecosystem of sister teams. For instance, our JavaScript framework, which is completely new to Isotope's version of Hadoop, has been built by the Data.js team, who are experts at JavaScript programming. We're doing similar sort of collaborations across the company. So in the sense, we've turned the OSS model of kind of open collaborative development and really try to make it a part of the internal ecosystem of Microsoft and ensuring that we've safeguarded from a legal IP protection perspective so that everyone can play safely in this environment and build value.